Ghoulish Gambit is the 13th community operation launched by Potato and VM servers. The campaign officially launched on November 27th of 2024 and ran all the way to December 25th. Like many of the community operations, Ghoulish Gambit opened a charity drive benefiting World Central Kitchen, a non-profit organization providing fresh meals in response to humanitarian, climate, and community crises. By the end of the operation's runtime, the charity drive raised a total of $36,559.62. Regarding the actual campaign itself, Ghoulish Gambit features 34 missions in total, 9 of which are intermediates, 18 that are advanced, and 7 that are experts and nightmares, all of which were handcrafted by the various content creators of Potato and VM. During the event's duration, I've had the opportunity to play through every single mission while earning the medals that could only be obtained during that time. For this operation review, I'll be judging the qualities of these missions as well as describing my overall experience playing through them. In addition, I'll be ranking every entry into an overall tier list to see which ones I found to be quite good and others that weren't as good as I would have hoped. But without wasting any more time, let's get into rating these missions. We'll start out by going through the intermediates first and work our way up to the experts. Intermediate missions are considered the easiest ones to complete, so it'll kind of just be a quick session to go through. On a map called Nightsky, we have Night of Fire. As the name suggests, this mission's main attraction is using robots that deal fire damage for most of the waves. For the most part, the mission plays pretty decently, but there were definitely a few problems I came across. Wave 3, for example, wasn't fire-based, but had a parachuting tank in the beginning, and the mechanic brought here never comes up again. All of the waves have a spellbook pyro support that uses varying spells that changes on a per wave basis, but past the time where they had fireball spells, they pretty much lost their significance. The finale consisted of 3 pyro bosses along with their spellbooks, but because the 2 of them had very long cooldowns on their spells, they were basically punching bags. Overall, it's a decent intermediate, but the moments where the mission attempts to be experimental falls flat. I'll give Night of Fire a C. On Creepside, we have Midnight Massacre. The only reason I found out there were some custom rebalances and guns in this mission was some brain rot message when I pressed my inspect button. One of the things changed was the classic that had its damage lowered significantly but had a faster fire rate, but it doesn't work with a classic because of the charge mechanic, meaning you have to tap fire each and every shot, making this weapon horrible to use. I was also using the budget TMP, which was kinda cool to use, but I never stuck with these weapons for long because they were both completely unupgradable. As for the intermediate, it's fairly simple all things considered, though nothing of interest happens until it gets to wave 4 where it really starts ramping up the difficulty. It has a rather beefy finale with its tanks and giant heavy medic pairs, but all things considered, it's a pretty good intermediate. Midnight Massacre is B tier. Twilight of Terror is on Skeleclipse. This mission has a massive collection of custom weapons, and there's way too many to mention. For most of what I played with, most ranged from pretty good to just straight up busted. It might have been the reason for this mission being just fish in a barrel for the most part. The only time this mission managed to push beyond the first area was on wave 5, with these rather interesting paired up giants being a holiday punch heavy glowing purple, along with a crits medic. Killing the medic seemed to allow the heavy to one-shot players, hence their name, which was pretty funny. Then after that, it was back to the usual spawn camping. And it carries over to the last wave where the chiefs, giants, and tanks didn't live for too long. There was this awkward 10-second wait time before facing the final boss, which was the second chief demo. This boss basically one-shotted us for the most part, but because of the mission's difficulty, they had a short lifetime of 15 seconds. This mission had some rather interesting bot designs, but gameplay-wise, the waves were pretty average, though the custom weapons provided did make for decent entertainment. I'll give Twilight of Terror a C. On Madhattan, we have Apoplexy. Right off the bat, this intermediate has a huge set of problems. The first wave starts pretty strange with all gate bots and no bomb for the first subwave, just so it could try to send out a bomb at the first gate. Now the second wave sets up for one of the biggest issues with the mission, where a majority of the common bots spawn in groups at a time and giants trickle in after another. The problem with these wave spawns is that killing these guys too quickly means you'll be stuck waiting for the next group, which can really ruin the pacing of the mission. There's a couple of strange design choices and oversights throughout. You'll have giant combos of pyros with poppable medics that can clump together at the gate, making for an extremely high damage check for no reason. There's a couple of giant airstrike soldiers on wave 4, but for some reason they didn't jump high enough for their launchers to shoot fast. There was a chief scout at the end that was practically non-threatening. By the time we killed it, the heavy medic combos that came with the giant soldiers straggled for an additional 20 seconds. There's not much onwards that challenges the players from both spawn points, though I did run into another straggling issue with 8 demo knights at the end. The last wave had a chief burst that would have beat the mission, and that's all I can really say about the boss other than it being called the truest Demoman god. This mission felt pretty underbaked in my experience, but is it F tier? No, because the mission didn't offend me in the slightest. But it most definitely played like somebody's first mission that didn't get the polishing it deserved. So the lowest I would give Apoplexy is D tier. Moving on to Butcher, we have a mission called Malpractice. As the name implies, there's going to be a lot of medics within this mission, but thankfully they aren't all the medics that you're used to. Many were quite new, like medics that allow patients to deal fire damage on wave 4, or on wave 2 where their patients can deal bleed on hit. I guess that joke's never gonna go away anytime soon. Of course, the medics with unique icons can be fighters too. At a certain point, a chief medic comes out that violates the Geneva Convention, pulling out a needle shotgun after the giants die. This mission does a pretty good job incorporating a recurring gag without making it repetitive, and neither do they overstay their welcome. Other than that, there was one more funny gag where a chief bread heavy explodes into several smaller ones and swarms half her team. The finale does tie everything together and brings out the final medic boss with every custom medic to be seen in it. Overall, this intermediate is quite good to play through, and the gimmicks were well executed and provided some solid entertainment. Malpractice belongs in A tier. Over at Decay, we have Night Error. The mission started with the use of only common bots with some mini giants on the first wave, which did spark some interest since it's pretty rare to see. The upper flank spawns were used quite a lot for this mission, though I did find it surprising that they let giant pyro spawn there on wave 2 of an intermediate. It did lead to our team getting pushed back to the hatch, though the wave was quite forgiving in that regard. Past that point though, I didn't really see nor experience anything in this mission that's quite noteworthy, but at the same time, this mission didn't play too terribly either. It is a bit on a challenging side, though this is mostly due to the small nature of the map. Since this mission isn't too remarkable and mostly plays as your typical mission, I'll give Night Error a C. On Legerdemain, we have Legacy Heresy. This intermediate starts off with a lot of fire bots, but unlike Night of Fire, it doesn't stick around with it for too long. Despite the mission playing okay-ish, I find this mission to be quite jarring from a creative standpoint. 2 of the waves start out by showing off a robot like it's a tutorial. It's done in an obvious fashion and really falls flat in what they were trying to do. Take for example wave 3, where by killing a charged soldier all alone, it tells you that blue outlines are bad news. Like, we're 6 minutes in and you're telling me now that blue equals bad? Even if this mission was trying to present itself as new player friendly, this whole mission is not built like it at all. There's plenty of boss dudes that have small gimmicks that makes them a bit more complicated to understand, and quite tacked on at that. This mission also hardly ever uses tanks. The only tank you'll ever see is on wave 2 that rises from the ground. The mission somewhat saves itself by its final wave by having giant nuke soldiers spout out the copy pasta towards the end. Before beating it though, the last nuke soldier will be a chief named Oppenheimer. Yep, that is this boss's name. Hey, how come this guy doesn't get the blue outline? The boss blast jumps and shoots 2 nuke rockets in the air before landing, but they can't pick up the bomb and fly with it, which is nice I suppose. But the constant jumping every 3 seconds makes this fight quite annoying to deal with, at least as a close range class. This mission isn't quite as bad as I'm making it out to be, though some of the creative decisions made stuck out were quite questionable. Legacy Heresy gets a C. Before moving on, I want to mention that this is the 7th mission we've covered up to this point. If you have managed to complete at least 7 missions in this event, you'll be awarded with the Haunted Tank Medal, which is a recolored version of the original Titanium Tank Medal. Another intermediate on the list is logging Dreadwood, which takes us over to Sludge. This is one of the many missions in this event that features some lore, and in here, it consists of only dialogue coming from a guy that calls himself the Zombie King. Not really sure what their business is, but they want us to surrender or die, and we will do none of those things. Now, the writing is incredibly immature-ish, but on top of that, it can be pretty hard to follow along, since the dialogue is only delivered to you in the chat box after a wave ends. 9 times out of 10, you're going to be thinking about what upgrades to purchase for the next wave. In terms of gameplay, the mission brings out a lot of custom robots, though it's done in a way where it's throwing out a lot of ideas out without expanding much on them. For example, some of the subways will feature skeletons, though they aren't really part of the main focus of a particular wave, as much as wave 3 makes it out to be. There are robots throughout that mark you for death. At first, the mission tries to maintain consistency by only having crossbow medics inflicted, but later they throw in Sandman scouts that also mark for death too. The mission will also bring out custom tanks like the Jarate tanks and the Blimp, but once again, they're only a small fraction of what to expect on a per wave basis. All that said, this mission in my experience actually plays fairly well and does have a good amount of pacing throughout the waves. There wasn't a point where the custom bots used increase or decrease the difficulty dramatically. And of course, the Zombie King comes out in the final subwave and fights you as they take the bomb with them. This boss has a couple of swords and explosive launchers, but they weren't too overwhelming. The only bad thing about this boss is that they don't have a death moment, so the mission just ends so sudden. This mission's hodgepodge wave design and the amateurly written dialogue definitely made this experience a very strange one, but thankfully the mission still provided some decent fun. Logging Dreadwood deserves a B. The final intermediate on the list is Astral Projection, bringing us to Underground. The thing that makes this mission immediately stand out is its less is more approach. Most of the intermediates we've been through have had quite a large variety of robots to shoot at wave by wave, so it's nice to see a mission go in a different direction. And the gameplay here definitely doesn't fall short. This mission does a pretty good job of mixing in robots that behave fundamentally different from their peers, in a way that no subwave ever feels monotonous or overstays their welcome. There's a couple of more interesting things at the later half, like a subwave of charging Demo Knights that also comes with a red charging tank. Then it had a giant medic that was overhealing a small hyper soldier, who is apparently a faulty Eugene clone. At the last wave is a soldier boss you have to kill that swaps between different types of rocket launchers based on the amount of health they had. They also came with skeleton support that spawned from the middle of the map, which made for an engaging way to send this mission off. Overall, this intermediate is pretty well made and provided a good experience with its varied yet simple gameplay. I'll give Astral Projection an A. With the intermediates out of the way, we're moving on to the advanced mission lineup. Relatively speaking, this is the average level of difficulty, which should provide a decent level of challenge without asking for too much effort from the players, while at the same time providing a fun experience. You will definitely be here for a long while, so strap in. Going to Bloodlust first, we have Reanimation, which is a one-wave endurance mission. Upon loading in, you're greeted by someone named the Detective who addresses you as the Mercenaries. Apparently, this place named New Folk Campsite has been cursed by a bloodthirsty cult and is sending monsters from another world to attack this place, and we're told to investigate some sort of truth and survive the night. This guy basically exists just to tell you about new enemies that are unique to this mission, though I find these tips to be poorly timed and rather dizzying. For example, these new zombies called Wretch Feeders spawn very shortly after the first break. Then they introduce a giant support scout that dies at the front to introduce a new game mechanic that summons zombies. It's pretty obnoxious having this annotation covering up exactly where you're supposed to be shooting at. Fortunately, this mission isn't all doom and gloom. The good thing about this mission is that it maintains a consistent level of difficulty. The only time there was a spike was when the mission decided to throw in several trios of giant banner soldiers, but it's towards the end, which is kind of expected. Towards the half of the mission, the detective warns us about a Chief Gigaburst soldier coming in. Killing them was pretty easy, though they came back for the next round on the final subwave, where they resurrect from the dead, doing the exact same thing but shooting homing rockets. The one bad thing about this ending is that there was no follow-up to the truth that we were supposedly investigating. I don't know if there was a translation error or the reference completely flew over my head, but there was no mention of our goal after the brief synopsis. Aside from the mission having issues with its writing, it still played decently in the end. Reanimation is B tier. Onto Bloodmoon, we have Sed de Sangres. This mission started off rather difficult by having charged soldiers lead the way with uber medics and a whole bunch of punchies and flare pyros. My team failed it the first time, but the next time around, my pyro enjoyed airblasting the robots into the pit, which made this wave pretty awkward to play. Even then, this first wave was asking a lot for an advance, with giant shotguns and fan scouts stacking together. Honestly, the first wave is only the major pain point of the mission. Since everything onwards, it plays completely fine. The one thing about this mission is that it had a weird gag going on with its bot names. Sometimes they threw in bots that did their job, but only somewhat. There's a chief scout at the end of Way Forward that, by killing them, reveals that they are in almost Major League. By reaching the end, you'll face a chief demo named MF Boom. Yeah, right on the nose there. It swings their Eyelander first before switching to a burst fire grenade launcher when reaching half of their health. The most jaw-dropping boss ever, but thankfully the challenge wasn't too overbearing. This mission didn't play too bad in the end, but the gatekeeping on this first wave can definitely hold this mission back. I'll give Sed de Sangres a C. On the same map comes another advanced named Spooky Spiral. For some odd reason, this mission also has a first wave that challenges the players too hard. Immediately, there's a body block check with giant scattergun scouts. Then it wants you to have a medic shield with all the rocket spam, but then it also wants to punish everything it asks for by spawning pyros. On top of all that, the wave throws in damage sponges towards the end, like armored black boxes and giant heavies. And just like Sed de Sangres, after the first wave, you're gonna breeze through the rest of the mission. Despite this mission having 8 waves, there's not really much to look forward to. Bit of stragglers on wave 3 with some heavies and scouts. I came across a few demo knights referencing one of the mission makers, which, while funny, was really overdoing it for an Easter egg. I did find this mission to be quite repetitive at times, and despite the attempts to change things up, it's done in a way where it's tossing ideas out and bringing out the next one. Look no further than the second half, where they introduce glowing robots that give certain buffs in a radius, and these buffs will never be present for the final wave, where you have to fight a chief heavy using an assortment of weapons. The only weird bug I found was that the icon disappeared from the wave bar in the middle of the fighting. This boss isn't too bad, it's just more of the same. In my opinion, the mission suffered from quite a few ideas that were thrown haphazardly, and it's gate-kept heavily by its first wave. The waves themselves also weren't too remarkable despite some of the things it had going for it, and for that, Spooky Spiral goes into D tier. Heading over the Boogge, we have Night of the Living Bread, which is a 2-wave endurance. As the name suggests, this is all about bread-infested robots. Some of the robots had this new gimmick where the green acid they dish out makes you bleed and colder than Girardi, but also makes you move faster, including the bots. The first time it was introduced though, it fell flat, mainly due to the fact that the bread heavies folded to our spine the moment they landed. Later into it, I could finally see how the area denial it brought shook things up a bit. The speed bonuses can be quite easily overlooked, and the only time it ever made a huge difference was for the giant scouts once in a while. But I am glad to say that this mission scales its difficulty appropriately. Easygoing in the beginning, but then challenges you towards the end without being too overbearing. Throughout the experience, the mission will warn you of what's to come, though the way the tips are given can definitely give off spoilers. After the last break, you'll get a cool cutscene of a tank being digested by a ginormous bread monster going by the name of the Mother Loaf. This monster moves towards the bomb hatch but doesn't deploy. Instead, it turns the whole area into a boss arena where you have to defeat it within 5 minutes. And not only does it try to bite and toss out bread bombs, it's got tentacles to support. And just like the expiration date, you do get to push the payload into the monster to deal massive damage. This final sequence is very impressive, though I do have to point out the massive performance drop I had while playing through this. I don't know if anyone had the same issue I had, but I had to play this fight at a much lower frame rate. The theatric finale this mission had certainly made for a satisfying ending, but the flaws I came across were too hard to ignore. At the very least, I give Night of the Living Bread a B. On the same map, we have Boneyard Shift. The first thing that you'll notice when playing this mission is that it takes itself pretty seriously. I was messing around with one of the new upgrades that allowed my grenade launcher to shoot explosive baseballs and burst. However, the huge upfront cost of 750 credits meant that I was at a huge disadvantage in the beginning. Damn near close to failing the first wave with a tank that almost deployed, until eventually our team got humbled against the giant black boxes on wave 2. Then I just went back to using the normal grenade launcher, which for the refunded credits helped us get through the second wave on the second attempt. My team was running double heavy with a medic on the first half, which I queued into by coincidence. It definitely made the first 3 waves slightly bearable to get through, but once you get to the later half, the mission really starts pushing itself by spawning vaccinator medics throughout. This last subwave on wave 4 not only punishes body blocking, but it also punishes medic shields with the bot support, while at the same time presenting a damage and coordination check thanks to the medic cycling resistances. It really is a lot, though the 5th wave did compensate by being somewhat easier, but just like before, we failed the wave one time because of the vaccinators. The final wave is also pretty challenging with the amount of lethality. The custom music that is provided here can certainly elevate the experience up a bit. The only thing that drags this finale down were the milk scout supports that can slow players down. They spawn slowly, though as a mobility class, you're gonna find these guys very frustrating to deal with. And yeah, the crit boosted giant demos at the end got us the first time around, but we learned the second time. While I do appreciate the attention to detail given to the mission, the gap in this mission's difficulty compared to the other advance is too wide. And if you don't go into this with the mindset that it's an expert, you'll have a bad time clearing this. I will give Boneyard Shift a C. Now that this is the 14th mission covered on the list, we would have earned ourselves the Ghoulish Gambit Poisonous Potato, a reskinned version of the baked potato from Operation Memes vs. Machines. This is the last medal that you could achieve during the event's duration, since the rest of the medals can only be earned by donating towards the charity drive. Let's keep going. Back on Butcher, we have Meat Grinder, which consists of 3 waves to beat. The unique feature of this mission is that it has a bomb that resets, but comes with a new mechanic where it stops resetting on the last subwave. In my own experience, the bomb never resetted on its own, but since the majority of the mission was spent on the first half of the map, I could see it was designed as a forgiveness mechanic. Even without it, I still enjoyed my time with this mission. It's got a good pacing and the appropriate level of difficulty, and there was never a point where the bots were quite overpowering. One thing I will point out that the mission does well is where the bomb pass changes at one point. And this was a mechanic that I once criticized in the past, where an intermediate mission that featured it gave way too short of a break for the players to adapt to. In Meat Grinder though, they improve on the idea by giving you a much longer break and making a very clear indication that the bomb path will change. That being said, this only ever appears on the last half of the final wave, and it's also quite in your face about it. Regardless, these improvements are a step in the right direction. The ending of this mission was quite lackluster, where you have to deal with the last tank after beating the 3 Giga burst fires. This tank hardly had any support bots with it, so it was a boring endeavor just shooting it down. But all things considered, the mission still provided a good experience, so I'm giving Meat Grinder a B. We're heading back to Creepside with a catastrophic conjuring, which has 4 waves to beat. The mission starts off well and good, and despite how hard the last subwave pushed, it wasn't too bad of a spike in difficulty, but this mission is definitely one of the longest to endure. 3 of the waves here clocked in around 8 minutes, which is quite longer than Meat Grinder, where their waves typically lasted around 6 minutes. The pacing for the most part did feel alright, though it did start feeling monotonous when the subwaves just sort of blend together, so over time I did get worn out while progressing through. Similar to Meat Grinder, this mission has a bomb reset timer that stops when the wave nears its end. Whenever it happens here though, the waves take a long pause before beginning the last subwave to hype up for a challenge. Wave 1 handled this well, though I did find Wave 2 to fall flat since it was just 3 Chrono Barrages and a beefy tank that were easy to beat. It did somewhat redeem itself with Wave 3, however the subwave was quite mediocre. In it, you have to fight a chief zombie that is basically just a headless horseman. Thematically, it makes zero sense, when throughout the mission, you've been fighting robots, not zombies, so this boss and its mechanics stick out like a sore thumb. The supports alongside were also zombies, but for whatever reason, they were just humans, and some of them were actually targeting the horsemen and running into them. And unfortunately, the wave didn't end with their death because of the last remaining demos that straggled. But that isn't the only boss encounter, since the next wave lets you fight Marasmus. The tip-off really did spoil the surprise and over-explains quite a bit of what you'll be doing. Though I did like how this boss was designed, where Marasmus could transform into a giant robot as their disguise, similar to how they function in Halloween events. Though just like with the horsemen, I did feel the jank here. There were some points where I just got stuck out of nowhere and died from it, and the zombie supports still appeared as humans. I will at least give credit for Marasmus being given their final scene. While this mission provided a decent experience, it does take a good long while to sit through. Also, the bosses feel tacked on, and I would have liked a more seamless transition to those encounters. Catastrophic Conjuring is in C tier. There's a third mission on the same map, which is called Dust to Dust. The main gimmick of this one is that a majority of the classes are slow-walking giant zombies. There's quite a lot of weapon rebalances, but for the most part, they're a one-to-one translation of the giant weapons. Though the majority of the movement has been removed by being a giant, the additional power that compensated for it made for a nice change in gameplay, and in my experience, I didn't find it too detrimental. Once you boot up the first wave, the mission starts presenting its lore, that this map holds some of Greyman's rejects that have been buried away, but apparently they've come to life and figured out how to escape, and blames us for stirring up the hive. Now immediately, the storytelling is done right, presenting itself at a time when everybody is engaging with the mission. The narrative is kept to a minimum, but it's mostly meant to introduce one of the more unique aspects of this mission, being the Grey bots. These bots are unique in that they attack both red and blue team, and the mission uses them as a way to change up the pacing of each wave. With all that being said, the narrative is being too convoluted. It's not exactly made clear who is narrating these scenes, and it wouldn't be the blue zombie since it's not explained why they're attacking us. I thought that it would be the friendly Demo Knight that appears on the final wave giving support, but no. Despite having the same dialogue color, they speak to you as if they don't know who you are and leaves. I get that the mission intentionally makes things vague, but I'm just left with more questions than answers. Regardless of the writing, this mission does a very good job in the gameplay department. The robots hit hard, but that naturally comes with giant players being bulky, and the waves do well enough to introduce various challenges that makes them engaging. However, my main gripe with the waves are that they can drag for quite a long while, not only because of the reduced mobility of most classes, but also the Grey bots and their tanks that force you away from the front of the map. The only exception to this is wave 4, where the Grey bots are completely absent in order to hype up for the final wave. We completed this wave in 4 minutes, which is definitely faster compared to the other's usual 5 to 6 minutes of playtime. The final wave is where you're evenly split between both sides of the battlefield simultaneously. This also marks the mission in the playthrough where it features a tank premiering on this operation. It's a combat tank, and these types of tanks are armed with an automated turret that targets the players. The one featured here is armed with a railgun and miniguns strapped onto it, and we'll be seeing more of these combat tanks throughout that are armed with many types of weapons. The mission will end off with a Grey chief demo to take down, while also dealing with the blue support that will try to take the bomb. This boss alternates between their grenade launcher and a sticky bomb launcher that shoots out roller mines. My only complaint is, once again, the length of this fight. The boss took around 16 seconds to spawn after the blue support came in, and the fight made up for half of the wave's runtime, at least in my own experience. Overall, it's a pretty good mission with its unique style of gameplay done right, but the lengthy runtime of most waves makes this one of the longest to beat, as well as the narration being too vague for its own good and quite difficult to follow along. I will still give Dust to Dust a B. On a unique map called Decompose, we have deprecated designs. This mission revolves around red robots supporting us throughout the waves, the majority of which are pretty strong, so naturally the mission tries to be on the harder side, though for most of the run we played at the front and middle of the map. Oddly, this mission admits that they won't use gate boss for the map, which I find quite strange not to take advantage of. This mission implements some gameplay features, though one such feature that is a complete one-off was for Wave 3, where you have to deal with blimps that spawn in the middle of the map. Their purpose was to self-destruct and drop down robots from the sky, and You are incentivized to destroy them since doing so will kill the robots in them, but in practice, it's pretty worthless to do so because of the small window provided to deal damage, and the robots that spawn from there really weren't all that dangerous. Another mechanic that does try to stick around were the Grey Patrols, which were basically giant grey robots that patrolled around the middle and last parts of the map. They started spawning by wave 4, but unlike Dust to Dust, these robots only serve as support bots in the background, though if you do manage to kill them, they grant banner buffs for the whole team for a short duration. I do have to highlight another one of the biggest flaws of the mission, being its writing. The first half of the mission has a guy telling you what supporting bots you'll be provided, but as soon as the grey bots start patrolling, they break character because apparently something is up with the teleporter, and at one point decides to go after a guy named Monochrome and attempt to break their ankles? Yeah, I suppose the creator is following up to the boss from Short Circuit Execution. The problem with the writing is that it's doing a lot of telling and not really showing you what's going on. So it's not really doing a good job of getting me invested into the build of fighting Monochrome at the very end. And somehow their ankles repair themselves, so what was the point of sending the guy over there? To have them revealed as an armless giant soldier? It would have been cool if he came in and supported us for the finale. It's just a hugely missed opportunity. As for the fight itself, Monochrome is just a great chief soldier that switches between rockets and a bison. Though, this fight will come with a lot of supporting bots that turns the battle to a complete chaos, and you will hardly ever see Monochrome target the blue robots. For some reason, this boss comes with a ring around him that just decreases your damage upon entering. It's just really arbitrary. Like the few bosses seen throughout, Monochrome has a death moment, however, it's ruined by the fact that their death doesn't disable all the other active robots, so you could just die and possibly miss out on it. In my opinion, this mission is alright on its own, but it's hindered by some of the design choices made, as well as the writing that fails to get the players invested into an ongoing story. I will have to put deprecated designs in D tier. Over at Heat Rock, we have Heated Argument, and it's got 8 waves. Though, this mission has a severe issue with pushing players out of the cave. I mean, I get it, this map is just a Halloween version of Big Rock, and we all call it Idle Rock for a reason. But even without a sniper, this whole advanced mission was just shooting fish in a barrel. While the tanks managed to split us away from the spawn area, far enough so that the boss could move out of there, they weren't all bulky enough to get out of the cave itself. Most of the ending subwaves dragged as the last remaining giants creeped towards us. Wave 3 had this unique lineup of giant scouts, but it falls flat, which again is due to the spawn camping issue this mission has. There was a pretty big straggler issue on Wave 4, where we had to finish off 14 heavies that added an extra 20 seconds of runtime. A Chief Pyro that appeared on Wave 5 was shooting a barrage of fire rockets, but because the supports for them folded like paper, they were extremely short-lived. And unfortunately, the same goes for the final wave, having a Chief Heavy that was basically non-threatening, since it spent the majority of its time punching our sentry that wasn't going down. It had a minigun during its final breath, but it wasn't enough to save itself. Overall, this mission is quite undertuned, especially for the map it was designed for, and if you're anything like me, you're gonna speedrun this mission by complete accident. I'll have to give Heated Argument a D. Next up is Baleful Bonanza on Metro. This is another one-wave endurance, though it is slightly harder to deal with. There's a couple of difficulty tweaks that the mission warns about. For one, the enemy medic shield does damage here, and there are some robots that can cast spells. I do like how this message is formatted so that it's easier to read. This mission starts out as your usual fluff, but as soon as you get to the second subwave, you'll immediately see crit boosted bots. It's at this point that the mission really likes to get spammy, where many of the robots here are designed to push through this tight choke in the underpass. There's quite a few moments throughout where the difficulty tends to go up and down constantly. Moments where you're just chilling at the front, and other times where you're just getting pushed far back by the amount of crit spam, the shield medics, and giants paired with medics. I want to mention that the mission forces the bomb path to go right, so I do appreciate the experience being consistent on subsequent retries. That said, I did notice a few bots going off the beaten path every now and then, which definitely made it annoying to keep constant watch of the bomb until the timer resets. I understand it's the map's fault, but I still would have preferred that the mission go out of its way to block these routes off. Over the course of the mission, it will feature vaccinator tanks that were also forewarned. Most of the vaccinator tanks did provide a fair bit of challenge, but we'll be coming back to this later. Oddly enough, this mission features a tank that has sentry guns on it, but it's not the combat tank. Nothing to complain about here, but it'll definitely become obsolete after the operation. About 2/3 of the way through, there was a Chief Demoman duo. Now, thankfully the subwave was balanced for the Demo Knight can't take the bomb when the loose cannon Demo dies, so that's good. What I will mark this mission down for though is its finale. This is where you have to fight both a Chief soldier and a melee vaccinator tank at once, and while the Chief may not be the problem, the issue is that the tank can easily end your run because it's only vulnerable to melee, and it's got quite a lot of health to show for it. Now luckily, I fully upgraded my skull cutter in preparation for this, and with my crits medic, our team did manage to complete the mission in time. But with that being said, this finale went too far, and definitely not the greatest way to end an endurance. Aside from this and the uneven difficulty curve going for it, this mission's pretty alright, though I will have to give Baleful Bonanza a C. Heading over over to Outlands, we have Hectic Haywire. This mission has a similar gimmick to deprecated designs where you have red bots supporting you. This time though, it's only a giant shotgun heavy named Badass Steve that upgrades over the course of the mission. As unique as this bot is, these types of robots suffer from just blending in the background, so you have little reason to care about them, even though this mission really wants you to do so. Each wave, there is this Reclamator AI thing that writes to you in a huge wall of text that's filled with a whole bunch of jargon. These texts are way too much to read through, all just to talk about Steve's upgrades or introducing gameplay tips, like picking up weapons from giants. It's also exceptionally jarring, where on one of the waves, the AI barely had anything to yap about. As for the mission, from my experience, it's also a bit on the hardest side, along with some hiccups along the way. No doubt thanks to Steve being around. A couple of difficulty spikes can be seen, like on wave 3 against giant burst fire demos and giant scattergun scouts. Near the end of wave 4, there was a chief scout that was a major league that I suppose was unique in that it stunned players. It did definitely wipe the floor, but I wasn't able to see the stun effect myself. This mission does like to put tanks at the very end of some waves. They're pretty beefy, but despite being pushed back to the hash at times, our damage was still sufficient enough to clear them. The finale is nothing to write home about, just a couple of giant heavies, uber medics, and burst fire demos, but I'll take it. While this mission offers a decent experience, its unique feature can easily be ignored and forgotten about after the fact. Hectic Haywire is C tier. Heading to a premiere map called Rancher, we have Contact. Now, if you need a palate cleanser after what we've been through, here it is. This mission presents with some explanation that something weird is going on, but at the same time, it keeps things to a minimum and lets the waves speak for themselves, which I find quite nice. This mission is definitely less spammier than the ones we just covered back to back. With that being said, the experience still provided a decent challenge, while at the same time, actually being quite a fun one to go through. This mission is pretty good at building up the suspense towards the later waves. A few small UFOs here and there, and quite often the mission will pair up giants with one another, but you'll eventually run into chiefs that spawn from UFOs directly. And these chiefs have unique weapons that haven't really been seen anywhere else in the operation. At the same time, these encounters function quite differently from one another, so the trope never wears itself out. And those UFOs in the beginning definitely weren't there for show, because at the end of wave 5, an even bigger one comes out with a cannon shooting you while circling around the map. Once you destroy it, this is where the mission reaches its peak, as the 6th wave unravels a looming threat. This wave changes up the rules of MVM, where you have to defeat 3 of the bosses here while delivering the power cores they drop to the laser cannon out front. I want to mention that this mission uses a variety of music to enhance the experience, but on top of that, some of the music has been originally composed for this mission specifically, the 2 of which are composed by Snurper Bob, which are named Extermination and Planetary Jurisdiction. If you'd like to listen to the tracks on their own, I'll have them linked in the description down below. Now this wave is where I thought the mission would end things here, but to my surprise, this mission comes with a 7th wave out of nowhere. In it, you have to kill the robot's leader, who is named the Iron Star Genius, and it's not your average boss fight. They start out in this UFO that acts like a tank, jumps high while spraying out rings that deal damage, and lasers that spins underneath it. Of course that's not all, since the boss comes out of it making for a second phase. There's quite a lot of moves that this boss does that encourages you to move around the arena, which along with the presentation here is pretty awesome. Doubly so when you put it in the final power core that they drop and fire off the laser cannon that destroys the mothership looming over the map. Damn, what a way to end off the mission. This mission is nothing short of incredible. It's excellently made all around and no doubt one of the best experiences this campaign has to offer. Among the missions featured in this event, Contact definitely deserves to be an S tier. We're back on Skeleclipse. This time we've got Vicious Delicious. Interesting name for starters. Just like the intermediate that took place here, this mission also has a lot of custom weapons. And just like before, they're pretty busted for the most part. And they definitely gave this mission a really hard time pushing the players back, which for an advance really isn't too great to start with. The only times it did manage to push was during the second half of the mission, though the waves definitely had their own problems. I found the ending of wave 3 to fall really flat. There was a chief scattergun scout that I couldn't figure out what it does, since it died within 8 seconds of us shooting it. The 4th wave marks the second time where we see a combat tank. This time, it features 2 rocket pods on it, and needless to say, it did a good job pushing us out on the second half of the wave it was featured. However, the combat tank really overstayed its welcome, as the next wave does the exact same thing again, this time using 2 miniguns and going the opposite direction. To my disappointment, the final boss suffers from the same issue as the chief scout. Looking closely, I guess it uses a burst fire lock and load? Really hard to tell because the mission just ends so sudden. Aside from the use of combat tanks, I didn't really find many parts of this mission to be noteworthy, likely thanks to the custom weapons here being pretty strong, so I'll have to give Vicious Delicious a D. On Swirl event, we have Sordid Scene. This marks the first advanced mission that actually uses gate bots, and we're already at the bottom of the advanced mission list. Throughout the mission, the waves really like to employ a lot of projectile spam throughout, though quite often I find the waves to end rather sluggishly. About halfway through, I did start to notice that it gets repetitive with the way each wave starts out, but to be fair, the mission occasionally changes up the giants in the commons, so I don't think it's necessarily a huge problem. Regardless, the waves do offer some variety in this challenge. Some of the custom tanks here spice things up a bit, like these tiny frontline tanks and irregular tanks with launchers strapped onto it that fired off fire bombs. The mission also spawns in chief robots as early as wave 2. There's one where it was just a bison soldier shooting in bursts, then on wave 4 at the beginning, you had a heater heavy with fireballs raining down near them, which really goes to show how spammy and cluttered the overall experience of the mission is. The final wave sends a whole bunch of frontline tanks and a train of crit boosted giant soldiers, and towards the end, you fight a chief engineer bot named the Sordid Slinger. Fighting this boss was slightly jank, since it had trouble aiming towards its targets. One of the abilities it had was where it could spawn a sentry. However, it's not that easily telegraphed, and are also hard to identify within the environment they often got stuck in. In any case, this mission turned out to be pretty decent in the end. Sordid Scene belongs in C tier. Moving over to Terror Lights, we've got a Cursed Aggrevication. New word of the day, folks. This mission has quite a variety of custom robots. However, it's not done in a way where it's just a typical robot with something tacked on. Most of the new bots acted fundamentally different, but were also quite easy to understand. A couple of chiefs were interesting to fight, like a heavy having a monoculus attached on top of their heads. Then you have a scout that revives themselves on death one time that's also paired with a shotgun heavy that fires homing fireballs. The mission has a lot of attention to detail added to the bots, not only on their appearance alone, but also their names, and quite often the waves go for a certain theme. And it's a good thing that the mission isn't just a fashion show, since the challenge and the overall experience scales up pretty well. By reaching the finale, you fight a boss named Entropy that's comprised of 3 chiefs acting as separate lives, each having their own distinct weapons and abilities, though they did get slightly too overwhelming near the end when it spammed a whole bunch of robots through its portal, but I think this is definitely in part due to the map's layout. Still though, I've had a fun experience with this one. It's a pretty good mission overall, and with not much to complain about. I'm giving a Cursed Aggrevication an A. Back on Underworld, we have Undead Dread. This mission is pretty unique in more ways than one. For starters, the bomb has a custom reset mechanic, but unlike what we've seen up to this point, every 10 seconds or so, it'll slowly retreat towards the front one hop at a time. Quite a novel idea, if I do say so myself. On wave 2, the mission introduces zombies that rise from the graves around the map. Whenever this happens, a color filter is applied for the duration. These zombies will be seen from this point onwards, though that same wave earlier had stragglers of said zombies. As far as difficulty is concerned, this mission is on the easier side, though the waves do take a while to get through. All that said, the mission does proceed to get wacky throughout, having robots like Bowman that fire Sandman balls, slowing players down while also forcing third person for a brief moment. And of course, the mission throws in medics that violates the Geneva Convention. These medics turn into shotgunners if you kill their patient, which is quite amusing. What's cool about this mission is that some of the boss weapons are unlocked for you once the mission's completed, all except this floating hash model, which is how I found out that this mission has a secret bonus wave. Now the way to unlock it is admittedly quite annoying. The opportunity only presents itself on wave 4, and the only hint that you'll ever get out of it, at least in my experience, is randomly stumbling upon them either as a scout or being pushed back by the wave. Here, this is where you need to collect giant ducks around the map while the coffins are active, and not only that, you can't be the only person that collects them, so you'll need others to participate as well. If you manage to get to the secret wave, you'll be forced into a cutscene of the hatch being yoinked up by a giant pyro who runs around with it, and wherever the hatch drops upon their death is where the robots would deploy the bomb, but only for that secret wave. Interesting secret, I suppose. Anyways, the last 2 waves were alright. There were plenty of samurai soldiers that were all able to duplicate themselves, making the ending of wave 4 pretty chaotic. The finale is also not much to write home about, since it consists of everything you've seen culminating together. Despite some of the issues I've had playing through it, it's still a well-made mission that the creator put a lot of care into to making it stand out among the rest. I'm placing Undead Dread in B tier. The last advance on the list takes place on Villa, and it's called Forgotten. This mission offers one of the most unique experiences this event, where everyone plays as a medic. Luckily, the loadout variety isn't one-dimensional, where the mission offers opportunities to upgrade in various ways. I, for one, decided to focus on melee, synergizing my Uberstar with the quick fix for self-healing whenever needed. And let's just say I was speedrunning my way to being the highest damage dealer on the team. In terms of gameplay, the mission plays out pretty well and the waves are balanced, but perhaps the most interesting part of the experience are the arenas you teleport into to every other wave. For example, you'll be teleported to an arena filled with fog where you fight a giant soldier while racing against time, and when the timer ends, the boss enrages and deals a lot of damage. Still, this fight is pretty good since it teaches you to work fast while under pressure. On wave 4, you're pitted against several robots that are purple inside a mansion-themed arena. The debuffs introduced here aren't immediately obvious, but from what I've seen, the yellow effect makes you a little bit quicker and jump higher, and I believe the purple drains your uber. Though as fun as it was, the problem I have with this wave is that it's extremely long, clocking it in at 7 minutes to complete for me. Not sure if it was our fault, but the subways in it definitely overstayed their welcome. When you get to wave 6, you go through the mansion itself, clearing room after room while being guided by the purple lighting. Fighting the boss were awkward at first since their AI seems to only turn on when you hit them, but the rooms themselves provided a nice change of pace without being too overwhelming. The final wave had us fight a boss medic that came with 2 phases. The first taking place in the mansion arena, shooting us with a crossbow while having soldiers swarm at times, and the next wave bringing out their entire moveset. This phase took a long time to get through because of the support boss that were constantly drawing our attention away, till eventually we failed it one time. Though the next time around, we regained our focus and finally defeated the boss. Despite the issues I've encountered, the mission is still very solid, and I've had a fun time playing through it. I'm sure all the people that spout out meta gaming will enjoy this one. Definitely placing Forgotten in A tier. With all the advanced missions done, we can now head deeper into the experts and nightmare missions. There's not that many to go over, though they would definitely be given the most attention to. We should expect to see missions that offer a much harsher challenge to overcome, while still providing a fun and enjoyable experience. Hopefully they won't be too difficult. We'll start off with Necropolis, that's on a new map called Memorial. This mission is on the easier side of expert, thanks to the front layout where it's super easy for a heavy and medic to camp on. Although the first wave was hardly able to push beyond the graveyard, the second wave was able to thanks to the flanking Demonites on the left. It became annoying when the bots can flank through an area that looks like they're not meant to go through, but since you're playing an expert, I'll overlook the map's flaw. The second wave's last half consisted of giant buff banners and plenty of bowmen and pyros, ending off with giant rapid soldiers backed by uber medics. This whole wave's really made for a litmus test, and most of what we've seen prior carries over to the next couple of waves, though the last subwave here felt like a repeat of the prior wave. Even though the giants and the medics were changed up, you're still treading the same ground of hoping to get the ubers in time. The next wave, to my disappointment, was a breeze. This wave could not manage to push through one bit, despite the increase in bots that would normally be difficult to deal with. It was quite a large dip in difficulty, because the wave right afterwards pushed immediately with its tank and giant heavy medic combos, combined with pyros and conch soldiers to boot. At one point, I ran into a technical difficulty where half of my team disconnected, which resulted in the wave pushing all the way towards the hatch. But to my surprise, they all reconnected in time to where we were still able to bounce back. We all kind of just chucked down a whole bunch of crit canteens towards the end, but I also give the mission props for allowing some breathing space despite pushing us to the limit. Overall, it's a pretty good expert that offers a nice challenge without being too overbearing, though some of the flaws regarding its wave designs bring it down slightly. I'll put Necropolis in B tier. Over in Meltdown, we have Lights Out. The one thing relating to the title is that the sun on the map is blocked off, which is nice, I suppose. The first few waves were decent warm-up rounds, though the first wave brought out plenty of robots that were on the bulkier side of things, along with a few medics. The second wave really tested how we handle playing around the map's ginormous sidelines, while also hinting the fact that the mission will use custom bots that lean on the annoying side of things, such as the supports here being invisible gun spies that only reveal themselves on shooting. The last sub-wave dragged, though this was largely in part due to being pushed at the end. The third wave is where the difficulty scale is up by employing a lot of projectile spam for the rest of the runtime. This whole wave is covered in projectiles including pipe grenades, fireballs, and white bison projectiles shot by these pale burst bison soldiers. Now, this is nitpicking, but it's pretty strange that these bison soldiers have a shotgun in their icon. The last subwave here fell really flat for me. The dialogue hypes you up for a tough encounter, but we just completely destroyed it without them ever killing one of us. I don't know if I was playing against a heavily nerfed version or something. Fourth wave is kind of more of the same, not much to it, though it did start spawning groups of snipers that were surprisingly oppressive. This wave brings out the combat tank on the last subwave that was armed with 2 rocket pods, but it was pretty disappointing that the wave didn't end with their destruction, instead having to finish off a giant heavy that lagged behind. Wave 5, which is the final wave, was the only time where it didn't push much on the first half, though afterwards it did spike up hard with giant demos, shield medics, and the swarms of pistol scouts. But this mission had a terribly designed boss at the end of it, Here, it's a black box soldier named Purple Heart that heals itself by a very significant amount, that it can reverse a lot of your progress while killing it. It shoots its usual rockets, but then it also has a katana to prevent body blocking, and on top of that, they will constantly shoot out a volley of pipes that knocks players around. This boss not only drags the finale far longer than it should, but isn't interesting to fight since they don't present any weaknesses for you to exploit. The only real effective means of preventing its healing are Uber canteens and having a medic shield. Now, thankfully, the boss doesn't stay as a DPS check forever, since over time it will have its max health reduced to the point where they can finally be killed, which usually happens by the time they force you to hold at the hatch. While the mission did start out and play decently on its own, over time I was getting unsatisfied with the way the rest of it was playing out and how they decided to end the whole experience. Unfortunately, I'm giving Lights Out a D. Trespasser Remastered, the one mission that's featured on Condemned. I bet some of you have been looking forward to this one, and boy am I glad to have seen it return. For those that aren't familiar, Trespasser is an endurance mission that has been transformed into a zombie survival type of experience. The remaster has brought a lot of improvements and changes, though there's far too many to go over in detail, so for the sake of time, I'll highlight the things that are important to talk about. For one, the weapon variety has seen noticeable improvements. Even though a couple of custom weapons for the original didn't return, many of the new ones added are very much welcome. This mission is also the first to feature a reward system where you get to unlock weapons based on how many times you beat Trespasser, and I don't think I need to mention how much replayability the mission has going for it, especially now. On top of all that, the pre-existing weapons have all had their balance passes. Some have been reworked to be different from previous iterations, but many have been buffed to be on par with one another, or at least better than they used to be. Overall, I'd say the weapon changes here made Trespasser far more easier to pick up for new players, as well as providing new ways to play for those returning to the mission. Another positive this mission has going for it is its solo mode. I'm only going to mention this briefly since I've already highlighted this on plenty of my other videos, but basically the remaster has completely revamped it from what it was before. This is a very difficult challenge, so I don't recommend it to everybody, but hey, if you're a Trespasser fan, it's there. In the remaster, the 250 credit damage penalty has been removed entirely, which is a small change, but definitely more helpful for the people that struggle while playing, and anyone that dies during a wave becomes a ghost dispenser. This somewhat takes away the horror experience the original had, but I suppose being able to help your teammates with what little you can provide is better than going on your phone while dead. And from what limited time I had, those who were last man standing still have to put in the work. Along with the visuals and decorations added, the waves themselves have been changed upon, but more importantly, the mission features a uniquely dynamic wave bar that lets you know what wave you'll be facing, giving you better knowledge on what upgrades to prioritize during the checkpoints throughout. Much of the pacing issues where certain subwaves dragged out have been fixed, while at the same time expanding upon a few subwaves to maintain the harsh difficulty this mission is known for. While many of these changes are welcome, I only have a few things to complain about. This remaster also reworks the Virophage. It used to be a boss that chased around you to eat you, and now it's been turned into a boss that summons hordes of zombies seen from the prior subwaves. I won't deny that this is better than a boss that one-shotted you back then, but it's quite an overwhelming encounter that turns the whole map into a chaotic mess. This boss is far less easy to damage as a melee class due to the surrounding zombies, and it will sometimes get stuck on certain parts of the environment. One last change I'll mention is the tank and bomb support subwave, and what the remaster changed here is not only making the bomb supports infinite, but also bringing in the combat tank that would blow up the map in 2 minutes if it hasn't been destroyed. Personally, I never had a problem with this subwave in the first place, since it comes directly after the giant burst fires that would normally down a few of your teammates, but it's a fine addition I suppose, though the combat tank really looks tacked on all for the sake of being new. The mission takes itself seriously with making the world feel like a zombie apocalypse, on top of the robots also being zombified, and then you have a tank looking like just straight out of a car wash. Now this is just a nitpick, let's be honest, but it's just a missed opportunity. It would have been awesome to see just how the robots would have their combat tank corrupted and make it much more scarier to fight than it already is. This is made especially apparent when you can see the old version's tank in solo mode, where its black texture and logo at the front makes the tank fit along the corrupted robots perfectly. With all being said, these changes that I complain about don't negatively affect the mission all that much. At the end of the day, the remaster's changes and improvements to Trespasser are a net positive, and it's definitely worth your time playing, or revisiting for that matter. Yes, I'm biased and all of that, but you know what? I still love Trespasser for what it is, and I'm glad to have seen it get a facelift after these past few years. Yeah, Trespasser is S tier, nobody can stop me. On Null, we have Zero, which is a 4-wave mission. Of all the missions here, this one takes its creative liberties in a far more cryptic and mysterious direction. And it's not just with the title alone, nor the map that it takes place on. There's some sort of dark entity that narrates over the course of the mission. Each wave presents a passage every time you start, and it asks questions in a philosophical manner. Immediately, I was intrigued as to what I was getting myself into, but then I spotted a minor spelling mistake on the second passage. Sorry guys, Zero's going down in the F tier. Jokes aside, this mission can and will get progressively weirder and weirder, and the moment you finish the first wave, the mission prints out messages to load up mission files before triggering the checkpoint. And if you do bring up the scoreboard, you'll notice that the mission's name actually changes. Not only that, the mission gets pretty meta, talking about how the robots here are in an endless cycle of life and death by their own creators. It also mentions about the mercenaries, about the power that the metals had, and that many tried and failed to acquire them for many years, until I guess that power corrupted them so hard they stopped chasing it? I want to talk about the gameplay before moving further though. In terms of the waves themselves, they're very well done and are quite fun to play through while still giving a good challenge. The first wave was a nice warm-up and provided hints like the bot's naming conventions that build up the overall vibe of the mission, and it does pay off. The waves onwards are pretty nice callbacks to the missions made in the past. It's almost like an archive player's wet dream. Even though my memory is kind of fuzzy, there are definitely some moments where I can recall encountering particular robots in the past, but I don't remember fighting a chieftain while being carted by tiny Ubered engineers. What was their name again? Right, I suppose that's the one issue holding this mission back from being greater than it already is. If you're out of the loop, you're not going to understand what's going on, since the mission is mostly banking on your nostalgia. But either way, the waves stand on their own pretty well, so much that I'm just left with not much to talk about. Anyways, before the mission could clarify about the power behind the metals, beating wave 3 will have the mission attempt to load up a mission file, but it doesn't exist. In fact, the narrator says it never existed and it will be waiting, before ending the mission prematurely, revealing the major twist that the mission actually consisted of 3 waves all this time. Damn, I was actually looking forward to what the mission was cooking for the 4th wave. But you know what? It's a fitting end to the overall experience. All in all, it's a well-designed mission with an excellent creative direction, though the mission would only get better if you stayed in touch with community MVM all these years. Regardless, I'm giving Zero an A. Going to a brand new map called Red Ridge, we have Red Ridge. This is another zombie survival type of experience, but unlike Trespasser, this one is basically COD zombies. I'm not complaining though, it's a competently made experience. It's got pretty much of what you would expect out of a COD zombies game. Perk ups, barricades, the power-ups that drop from the zombies. Hell, even the zombies themselves sound exactly the same here. There's quite a few specials that this mission spawns in at times. For example, these soldier jockeys or dough hoppers are this mission's hellhounds, and they pretty much have their rounds dedicated to them. Couple of boomer heavies that can take reduced gun damage and explode on death, and there's a flog pyros that can teleport around. Of course, the mission does have a few ranged specials, some of which can mark you for death, but in the late game, you'll have heavies with miniguns that raises the difficulty tremendously. In terms of balance, there was never a point where a weapon was extremely overpowered or someone could easily carry the entire team on their own. As for classes, Engineer is easily the best class because of their sentry gun and dispensers, bypassing the ammo problem other classes have to deal with, as well as providing a nice distraction for the zombies. And as for solo, I only managed to get up to wave 20 before being surrounded by the specials outside the garage, and that was where I called it quits, since the difficulty spikes up tremendously with the heavy securities. Even though this mission can be considered endless, the mission provides an objective that you can actually do to complete the run yourself. You're supposed to find 5 gas cans scattered around the map so that you can fuel the van inside the garage outdoors, though doing this requires you to power up the map first in the turbine room. Then you have to use the teleporter that takes you to the Pack-a-Punch at least 3 times, just to teleport into a secret room where you can deactivate the executive lockdown, and that allows us to print out files from the computer room that's near the teleporter, which can take several minutes. The files will be put into a briefcase that you can grab, and you're told to rig the teleporter to self-destruct. And finally, you bring the briefcase over to the van and gather everybody around to escape the map. Yeah, this whole objective run sounds convoluted, but to be honest, it really isn't that bad. Though the annotation will constantly pop up at a certain point, which can be annoying if you can't spend the time progressing through. The only thing I can really complain about is minor, but it's a jank with the zombie AI. If you know anything about bot aggro and MVM, you'll know that an undisguised spy is the highest priority on the list. The same applies here, and it's pretty hilarious that the zombies will just ignore you completely and focus on the spy that's far away. That and it's pretty hard to accurately shoot the zombies you kite around, since they're pretty smart about trying to surround you. Other than that, while it may not have the same level of polish or attention to detail as its competitor, this mission, if you can call it that, is a pretty fun experience overall and a breath of fresh air. I'd say that Red Ridge earns an A. Back on Terralict, we have the other one-wave expert endurance called Echoes of a Warzone. The lore of this mission is that apparently we're sent down to Hell as part of the Hell Exploration Project. Meh, I've been through worse, but take that explanation seriously because as soon as you start the wave, the mission lowers the saturation. Fog circles around the map as well as a massive blimp that looms above the sky. The mission starts off pretty normal for the most part, up until a massive nuke lands on top of the middle house without exploding, along with a tank dropping directly from the sky out at the front. And this tank introduces the main gameplay mechanic of the mission, where killing tanks as well as specific highlighted targets extends the detonation timer of the nuke. This is the moment where the mission unveils itself into a direct inspiration of Pizza Tower. In one of the levels, the player goes through a battlefield while under pressure by the same bomb timer that can be extended by destroying war terminals throughout the level. These mechanics translated over makes for an extremely thrilling mission, and the creative vision alongside is executed extremely well. This is the one mission where you should turn up the music volume in the game. Not only is the music from that Pizza Tower level ported over, but it complements exactly what you're doing, shooting down the stampeding horde of bots in hopes of extending your lifespan for as long as possible. Even though the bomb timer can be quite generous, the mission still provides a tough challenge to overcome. Throughout the second section, there isn't any bomb for the boss to carry, though there are plenty of tanks to compensate. The mission will occasionally make you walk around the map, seeking out the war machines that drop from the sky that contributes towards the timer. Many are quite tough, but at the same time, not too overly complex to deal with. I also appreciate their additions since they change up the pacing of the mission in a good way. And it's a good thing that the mid-wave breaks in the mission pauses the timer. Reaching the second half of the mission is where the bombs return on the field, basically combining elements of the first two sections from the first half, but with a unique twist that only the robots can carry the bombs, which are highlighted by their helmets. Other than that, it's pretty much more of the same other than the increase in difficulty, which this mission already does a good job of. And it's after reaching the final checkpoint of the mission that you reach its climax, facing off against a general who has been leading the undead army, whose name's Overclock Dave, that is supposedly returning from a prior mission made by the same creator. The one phrase to describe this boss is that it's pretty awesome. Much like the Iron Star Genius from Contact, Dave has a pretty unique moveset, ranging from its minigun to the ground pounds that shake the ground, as well as launching a volley of pipes in one fell swoop. At one point, he teleports back to spawn and sends in the combat tank, featuring not only a railgun, but a rocket pod that uniquely fires off homing rockets. And once destroyed, Dave returns to the battered state, but with fight still left within them, and their abilities gets increasingly more dangerous as they switch over to panic mode during its final moments. By killing Dave, the mission will end with their destruction, creating a pretty climactic explosion and bringing us out of hell, and finally concluding the mission. Wow, talk about absolute cinema. This mission did a fantastic job with its presentation and executing its unique gameplay mechanic flawlessly. The challenge was very much fun with the use of the timer to make the overall experience exhilarating to play through. Despite a couple of retries, I genuinely have nothing to complain about in terms of the waves or the bots used at all. They are all perfectly well balanced. Alongside Contact and Trespasser Remaster, Echoes of a Warzone is undeniably S tier. The last mission we'll cover in Ghoulish Gambit is Light Up the Night from White Cliff event. The mission itself goes out of its way to disable the gate in the Underworld in this map, so I can now say that there's no expert missions that uses gate bots. Also, if you're seeing missing textures around the map, I haven't figured out how to fix them before playing through this. This mission uses quite a lot of custom robots throughout, and each wave brings something unique to the table in terms of gameplay mechanics. Quite often the mission has you facing against chiefs at the end of most waves. The Chief Vortex Blade Soldier in wave 1 was a pretty cool encounter, charging up its saw blades that bounce around the map. I suppose many of the ideas here were brought over from a game called Ultrakill. I don't know anything about Ultrakill, so if you spot anything, let us know. Except this letter on the screen, I'll be talking about this one later. Wave 3 had its chief soldier that 90% of the time launched airstrikes for most of the wave. The area denial they brought was quite long lasting, though we eventually figured out how to exploit their targeting by having somebody run up ahead. The only chief in this mission that I'm not too much of a fan of was the Chief Viper spot in wave 5, where they harassed you while dealing with a myriad of tanks and bots. For a distraction expert, they sure have a really nasty way of dealing damage, where their cleaver throws deal an obscene 90 unresistible damage. Though I do like that they use a recall canteen when taking enough damage, which made the fight against the combat tank a thrilling and engaging way to end the wave. Of course, the wave between these do bring mechanics of their own, though they can kinda just blend in the background in practice. The one that I didn't see much play of was when wave 2 deployed these skeleton bombers that turn robots into gold, letting them be able to disable our own healing. Though for my playthrough, it seemed their AI broke, so the mechanic hardly ever came to relevance. The 6th wave isn't too interesting to speak of, though some of the bots seen earlier return as as a chief duo towards the end. It still provided for a nice break for the final wave. Here, it starts off by forcing a cutscene in the middle of the map. A tank hologram appears, along with the final boss named the Skybreaker that teleports through a portal, and with an ultra kill soundtrack to boot. The boss started out as a Titan, though at certain points the boss will ubercharge, forcing you to kill the incoming boss. This first phase was pretty annoying when it was constantly making you go back and forth around the map. I thought that the phase would end when the combat tank that teleported in got destroyed, but no, it forces you back to the front to kill 12 crit soldiers. The boss on the second phase shrinks down and teleports to you, shooting projectiles that seems to be element based. Even though this phase was sending more bomb support, for the most part we all just focus on the boss. In its final moments, it turns on desperation mode, which halves their damage taken and started parrying projectiles with their fist. Yeah, I got domed in the last second, but at least I got to see the Skybreaker fall down and explode, which was a nice way to end it all. Overall, this expert is one of the hardest to complete on the list. While some of the unique robots and mechanics can be on the frustrating side of things, I do appreciate the added challenges that made the overall experience quite noteworthy, and I still had a good time clearing the mission. Okay, now that it's later, we can now talk about the elephants in the room. The massive wall of text that appears in Spawn explains its uniquely featured ranking system where you can get as high as P rank, or perfect rank, and achieving that rank will unlock the secret boss for you to fight at the very end. In this mission, the way to get P rank is based on kills, but it's been simplified to where deaths are basically the only contributing factor to the score. Each player's death subtracts 200 points away from the score, which doesn't sound too much, but dying in an expert is extremely easy and it can add up substantially over time. This challenge basically boils down to not having everybody on the team dying too many times, which essentially means having a medic on the team is non-negotiable. But you also need a medic that doesn't sugarcoat it. Yeah, we're talking about the kind of medic that abuses shields, frequently uses Uber charges, and sharing Uber canteens constantly. At the same time, getting P rank demands a lot of skill coming from everyone on the team, where they all have to hold down the defenses and busting down those tanks. This mission's P rank system is definitely touting itself as a hardcore challenge, but after playing through it, what I feel that the mission is doing wrong is how it handles progressing towards P rank. In my opinion, it's too obfuscated. The score at the bottom only tracks your overall progress, not the waves themselves. Even though deaths are the only major difference between earning P rank or not, there is no death counter that the mission keeps track of, meaning that throughout the entire experience, my whole team had to tally up each other's deaths, on top of figuring out the mathematics of what points each wave gave in total. And before you ask, no, the support bots in the mission do not contribute to the score at all, with the only exception being the Sentry Buster. But that also further complicates things. The Sentry Busters, as unreliable as they are to spawn, compensates for half of a player's death, so we also had to count how many Sentry Busters have and will appear in the run too. This all matters because the only times where you can reliably determine whether to restart the run or not are the ends of waves 1 and 5, either because you died way too many times early on or just didn't meet the minimum point threshold you figured out. Outside of those, you are completely left in the dark, meaning you'll be wasting a lot of time trying to figure out if you're on track for P rank. For us, it was only after 7 attempts that we finally earned the bare minimum, which was at least 15,000 points, and our team barely scratched the minimum amount for P rank by the end of it, which was 19,000. Mind you, you could still lose points here and fall below the threshold. I mean, God forbid you have somebody on the team that trolls at the end. Well, whatever the secret boss is, I hope that the 3 hours spent grinding for P rank was worth it in the end. The secret final boss's name is the Time-Constrained Soul. If you ever played Dover from the prior campaigns, you'll know exactly who this is. But even without that fact, the boss makes a very impressive introduction, and with his own custom music from Lost Judgement. There's no bomb in this fight, though a 5-minute countdown timer starts where you need to give it your all. This boss has a lot of weapons and moves that counter certain playstyles. Hell, even the boss punishes you for canteen spamming, since he'll also use the same power-up if it's been used too much. Second phase is where they spawn 2 bodyguards to assist that are indestructible, while at the same time transform into various types of chief robots. By this point, the boss will occasionally use their time stop ability, putting everything to a standstill as they unleash a barrage of rockets. Even though this move basically one-shots you, it's very incredible to see. It's not used all that frequently, and the warning sound can help you get to cover, albeit somewhat. Though I wish the timer actually stops whenever the boss does this. It's a pretty challenging boss fight all around, but still fair enough where it still remains fun. And it's made extremely clear that the creator put a lot of care into making the secret boss all the more worth it, but I can't help but feel that there are a few things missing that would have made the journey all the more worth it. Let's clear up one thing. The secret boss fight is all that you ever get in this challenge. The mission doesn't go out of its way to give a badge of honor for those that P-ranked it, which is a pretty massive disappointment. I know people such as myself usually don't revisit these missions after they complete it, but it still would have been nice to get some recognition at the very least. One other thing missing from the boss is that it has no final cutscene. Now, to be fair, many of the bosses in Ghoulish Gambit go out the exact same way, with this one being one of the lucky few that has a death animation, even though it kinda just ragdolls to the ground and cartoonishly explodes. Wait, why does it look like this? But compare this to the Prime Souls in Ultra Kill, which the boss was intended to replicate, and you'll see that the Prime Souls had their monologue at the end of the battle before dying on their own terms. And believe it or not, there has been one boss in Community MVM with a similar scenario. In Callan Artillery, you get to have the general reminisce about their final moments before you bonk them in the head with the golden pan. The same idea could work with a time-constrained soul, especially considering the fact that they were used 3 times in his lifetime. But let's cut this short. As the secret boss currently stands, it is pretty awesome to fight against, and the whole P-rank system is a completely optional challenge at the end of the day. That being said, this will most definitely be the only implementation of it. Even without all of this, the mission still stands up pretty well. And to reiterate, the use of unique robots and gameplay mechanics gives a challenging yet fun and memorable experience. But ultimately, I will have to give Light Up the Night a B. That's it. That's the entire mission list for Ghoulish Gambit, all ranked into a tier list based on what I liked and disliked. Quite a substantial length amount of time to go through, especially given the past campaign reviews. But I know one thing for sure. By witnessing many of the unique innovations and artistic talents brought to life, I can only imagine that the creative ceiling will continue to get higher and higher. Before I wrap things up, I'll briefly mention that these missions are all playable on their servers. If you do want to go out of your way to play them, you can head over to Potato's archive server website and play the missions there. While the medals can't be earned anymore since the event duration has long since passed, the experience is completely free and does have a consistent player base. Anyways, let me know what you think about Ghoulish Gambit, and if any of these missions you saw today lived or exceeded your expectations. If you'd like to see more Community MVM related content like this review, well, you know what to do. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next one.